in Ballston in order to come to this afternoon's event. It has been an incredible year for our congregation. Our very first service in this space was on Palm Sunday, and we had our grand opening with our partners from True Ground on April 15th. And at that event, Nina had a wonderful idea. She said, there are so many congregations interested in this type of a project. Could you host an event? And I said, of course, we'd be glad to. And I'm so grateful that Nina had the right folks to talk to actually now have 2 other events that have already happened throughout the Commonwealth of Virginia. So you all are among good company here in Virginia of other folks who are interested in using their resources to benefit this world. So in case this is your first time in our space, I want to make sure that you know how to find the restrooms if you need them at any point. You just go through the doors in the rear of the sanctuary, make a left, and then one more left, and you'll see the sign for the restrooms. At the end of all of the presentations today, we're going to offer tours of our space. It'll include the church space, Kinhaven school space, and also the residential space. So we're going to offer 2 different tours immediately after the presentations end, and then also we'll have a second tour for those who want to spend some time at the expo in the fellowship hall first. So that is all I have to offer to you besides a warm welcome. Nina?
It was such an honor to be part of that celebration this spring. This was one of the projects I worked on before I retired from True Ground, Arlington Partnership for Affordable Housing, and to see everyone here to come celebrate this amazing accomplishment. And by no means is this an easy journey. So warning, you'll hear a lot about hard journeys. But it's also an exciting journey, and it's wonderful to see churches use their land and property for more mission. So I'm going to start by just telling you, since I retired, I have become very engaged with an Episcopal organization called Virginia Episcopal Real Estate Partners. We were founded in 1959 as Virginia Diocesan Homes, but we've rebranded because we see there's a great need for congregations to go through this journey of the discernment and development for what to do to enhance the mission of their facilities. So our focus is discipleship, community impact, and financial stability. And we encourage those of you that are in judicatories to think about how you work together and learn from each other, because there's so much in this space. And as you'll see today, there's so much talent. Right now, we're working with a few churches around the state: Christ Ascension in Richmond, Iglesia Santa Maria in Falls Church, Trinity Church in Arlington, right here on Columbia Pike. And we also created an advisor network, and happy to share that with anybody. We put out an RFP last year and asked a bunch of developers and consultants, would they be willing to work with congregations? So we've got that database and their responses. So let us know if you want to share that, even non-Episcopalians. And as we start this conversation, I just want to talk about why. Why is mission real estate important, other than loving your neighbor as yourself, right? That's such a Christian principle, and I know we welcome all faiths, but for those of you that have the Christian path, and to act justly and love mercy. Like, how can we all be worried less? I have talked to so many priests who are worried about their roof, who are worried about, the repairs they need on their building, and they're not able to spend the time and energy on how to act justly and love mercy. So your real estate is this buried treasure, as we like to say. It comes from the parable of the talents, something that could do more for the community. So we want this workshop, which is part of our mission, to partner with, and I'll introduce in a minute, the Virginia Interfaith Center for Public Policy, our co-sponsor for these events. But the purpose for this workshop, we wanted to share with you some of the things we've learned about mission real estate. And number one, it's very important to think about discernment. Why are you doing this? So what's that process? So that'll be our first panel after we have our introductory speakers talking about resources. Second is development. We actually have a couple folks, developers and their church partners, to talk to you about that journey. And then operations. This isn't a one-time event. This is a partnership for a long period of time. And Couple logistic things. We will send everyone who's signed up here a copy of this PowerPoint. So don't feel like you have to take photographs of every slide. And we are also filming this event. So this is something that we hope to put up on our website, VEREP's website, as well as the Virginia Interfaith Center. And I think that's all I have to share at this time. I'll come back for the development panel, but I'm really honored to introduce Lakeisha Cook, who is the co-executive director of the Virginia Interfaith Center and our co-sponsor.
Good afternoon. It is so wonderful to be here with you on this afternoon as we are here talking about the important issue of housing. But as we are about to talk about housing, let me first acknowledge the land on which we stand and sit. We acknowledge the original stewards of this land, who were the Acostan and the Piscataway people, who took care and stewarded this land, and we're so grateful for their toil, and we acknowledge them in this space. I am here representing Virginia Interfaith Center for Public Policy. We are really excited to be in partnership with Virginia Episcopal Real Estate Partners and sponsoring these workshops all throughout the Commonwealth. And we are very grateful for the leadership and staff of Central United Methodist Church, grateful for their hospitality and grateful for them hosting us in this space today. Virginia Interfaith Center for Public Policy is a nonpartisan coalition of over 25,000 members, and it is the largest statewide advocacy voice for the interfaith community in Virginia. We engage people of faith and goodwill in advocating for racial, social, and economic justice in Virginia's policies and practices through education, prayer, and action. We are known in Virginia for several different things. Known first for our effective advocacy. We win real improvements for people in Virginia. We are focused on fighting for justice for all Virginians so that all Virginians can thrive in the communities that they live in. We recognize that justice is not a solitary act, but a communal pursuit. We have proudly assisted in bringing the interfaith voices from around the Commonwealth and assisted in securing victories such as the expansion of Medicaid and the abolition of the death penalty, making Virginia the first state in the South to abolish the death penalty. Our work has real-life consequences, and there's no way we could accomplish it without the hard work of the base, which is the people of faith and goodwill in the Commonwealth, which leads us to our next strength, which is our diversity. Our base reflects the beautiful diversity of Virginia. We have people of different faiths, ages, and backgrounds involved in the work of justice. Another strength of ours is the way in which we work in a bipartisan way. In a season where there is so much division, we celebrate our ability to bring people together united in a fight for justice. Our work doesn't just unify those in our base, but it also becomes an opportunity to unite our legislators across the aisle. Many of our bills that we help to support intentionally have both Democratic and Republican patrons, and most of our bills have bipartisan support. And that is not an easy feat in 2024. Another one of our strengths is our civic engagement work. Our civic engagement work includes recruiting congregations that will commit to be 100% voting congregations, and that continues to expand each year that we do it. But we also strive to ensure that every voice is heard in Virginia's decision-making process. Just this weekend, on Sunday, in Richmond, we hosted 3 Souls to the Polls event simultaneously, but we were able to give out 600 fish fry meals to people who came and early voted. We've already seen the numbers come back from our efforts, and we have already doubled the number of people who voted on Sunday last year in Richmond. We do good work, and we work in several policy buckets. The policy buckets that we work in are affordable housing, criminal justice reform, health equity, and we also work in working family supports. We educate the people of Virginia so that they're able to advocate for good policy. We take away the ambiguity that sometimes is there when people don't know how to engage the people they have elected and put into office, holding these people accountable to represent those things that we hold value to. So these are the buckets that we work in, and as I've already mentioned, we work in one of the buckets is our affordable housing work. Our housing work, in addition to providing educational moments like we are in this afternoon, we also advocate policy in the area of increasing funding for affordable housing, tenant protections, and making it easier for congregations who are seeking to build affordable housing. Faith communities are uniquely positioned in the fight for affordable housing because many times when members of our community are struggling to either secure housing or pay their rent or need assistance with utilities, congregations are the first places that they reach out to. Sadly, churches continue to close every week, and many are struggling to pivot coming off the pandemic. So with dwindling attendance, aging memberships, there is an opportunity to reimagine that what can be done with buildings and land owned by congregations throughout the Commonwealth. And we are excited about the resources and the wisdom that will be shared with you on today. So again, thank you so much for coming. We do have a table that is in the exhibit area, the expo, so please make sure you stop by our table so that you can stay connected with our work. So now it is my pleasure to be able to introduce our next speaker. We're going to welcome Jill Norcross, and she is from the Northern Virginia Affordable Housing Association.
Thank you so much. It is such an honor and a privilege to be here today. My name is Jill Norcross. I'm the Executive Director of the Northern Virginia Affordable Housing Alliance. We have a changed mission because we have recently merged with the Alliance for Housing Solutions. So for those of you who are from Arlington, Virginia, you know that this organization has been a really long-term partner in our work in advocacy. So it's been an honor to work with my colleague Alice Hogan, who's here today as now the NVAHA Director for Arlington. And I'm also pleased to welcome Amanda Corin, who's now our NVAHA Director in Loudoun County. So we're expanding our staff, we're expanding our team, and our mission is to increase the supply of and equitable access to affordable housing in Northern Virginia through education, advocacy, and community partnership. And I do want to just underline the community partnership piece because we know that faith-based affordable housing development really takes partners. And I think you're going to learn and hear from a lot of the partners today who have gone through this journey before, who are here for you if you have questions, if you've had concerns, if you need answers. It's an amazing group of people. In my past life, I served as a consultant to many of the faith communities here in Northern Virginia who've gone down this path. It's been such a rewarding experience to see people think beyond themselves, even beyond their own congregations and communities. But I do want to talk a little bit about the importance of advocacy in affordable housing and how our faith communities really have stepped up and stood out as some of the best advocates, especially those of you who have gone ahead and developed affordable housing on your property. When we talk about the advocate's role, I think it's important, and we know as the community of faith, that we tie it to human services. We understand the need for stable housing with services is critical in our community. Personally, I think we need to use our voice to support permanent supportive housing solutions, so that's housing for our really most vulnerable residents in our community, and I think our faith leaders really can help us with that. I'm excited because I think, unfortunately, this housing crisis really has brought the opportunity to kind of share new messages about why housing is important. So we can talk about how affordable housing really is economic development here in Northern Virginia and across the state, and how our local resources, our local governments that are contributing tax revenue for affordable housing is really an investment in our communities and something that's needed. And that job growth and our economic growth here requires housing at all affordability levels. I think if you talk to a lot of our elected officials, they'll tell you when they talk to potential businesses and companies who are looking to relocate to Northern Virginia, they have concerns about the availability for housing supply and housing rents and sale price for those across their workforce. So I think when we are reaching out, we have a very bipartisan friendly message that we do need housing supply and affordability. So I really appreciate our advocates that can kind of help share that message as well. We know, and we've done, and Arlington and Alexandria especially have done a lot of hard work around policy, land use, and zoning. I think it's important that our advocacy continue to hammer home the importance of zoning reform as a racial justice issue. It's a social justice issue. And so I really applaud all of you who have worked so hard to lift that up in our communities and continue to do so. We've seen that parking reductions can really benefit our affordable housing providers as well. We know that many people who live in affordable housing aren't able to pay their rent in addition to own their own car. So making the case for reduced parking reductions also brings down the cost. We know that digging the garage under this building was an extreme cost, as we know. And so if we can continue to advocate for those policy changes and solutions, we lift that up too. And I also want to recognize and applaud your efforts to speak up. When we go before our local governments during budget season, when we go before our local governments to say, yes, we need this housing in our backyard, the faith community partnerships through Voice and others really are there with us every step of the way. So I really just want to thank you and encourage you, if you do not have your own land or resources, you do have your voice in your faith community. People are listening, our elected officials are listening to you, and we really need you to kind of join us in this fight here locally and then, of course, at the statewide level. And we really want to lift up the incredible work of the Virginia Interfaith Center for Public Policy, our other statewide housing partners, of course, VEREP, thank you for having us, and CMUC. It's really an incredible pleasure to see this vision of yours be realized in a beautiful, beautiful space. So please keep in touch with us. We are here. We offer free lunch and learn programming if you have questions about affordable housing on a monthly basis where, covering a topic related to affordable housing. It can be a great 101 introduction for your congregation if they have questions about affordable housing, how it's designed, how it's developed, how we're reaching those who most need it. We also have a monthly Housing in Action newsletter where we try to publish everything that's happening in the 5 jurisdictions in Northern Virginia, opportunities for advocacy and policy reform. And we also have a Rising Housing Leaders program, so if there are younger people in your congregations or in your companies who want to learn more about affordable housing, we offer scholarships to conferences. We offer training opportunities for them as well to kind of build a stronger next generation network of the leaders who are going to help us solve the housing crisis. So again, thank you for having me. I look forward to moderating one of the panels on discernment, and it's a pleasure. And now I'd like to welcome my friend and affordable housing champion, Helen McIlvaine with the City of Alexandria.
So thank you to Central United Methodist for hosting us. Your sanctuary is beautiful. I'd also like to thank VEREP, the Virginia Interfaith Center for Public Policy, Virginia Housing, and of course NVAHA. And I always take a moment to pause and start with a photo of people who have been helped with affordable housing, because I think we all love to see the real estate, the glossy building photos, but this is our why. Whether you are a government, a public servant or employee, or a church that's looking for what's next for us, or just a neighbor who's concerned about others. It's the people, and it's sort of why we do what we do. And you know what? How do I advance the slides? Oh, very good. Okay. Magic. Oh, thank you very much, and I'm glad I brought the paper too. So I start with our 2013 Housing Master Plan. The city was the first in our region to do one of these, and it has been our roadmap for how the city creates housing policies, invests in housing, and does development with partners. And so we came up with some things that sound very simple, but really are inspiring every day to us, including that housing should be for all people, that we should have housings for people at all incomes, life stages, and abilities, that we should have a distribution of housing citywide, and we should strive for mixed income neighborhoods and buildings when it's possible, communities, and that we should locate our housing whenever possible in neighborhoods with access to transit, jobs, services, and amenities. So the Housing Master Plan target was to create 2,000 committed affordable units. And remember that number, 2,000, because I'll refer to it in a minute. And then just a few years ago, the city participated in a regional group, and all 22 jurisdictions that belong to the Council of Governments agreed that we should work together to create more housing, pretty much based on the need for economic development and to be competitive, but also because housing is honestly a regional issue. And for the city, that meant that we would commit to an additional 2,250 units. So our collective number by 2030 is 4,250. And then I would say another significant thing for the city is that in 2021, with very little fanfare and no complaints, the city adopted an all-Alexandria resolution. And it expressed, one, the city's regret at having participated in racial discrimination and its permutations across our housing market, our criminal justice system, our access to capital, our educational system. We were among the last places in Virginia to integrate. And it expressed our commitment to racial and social equity. So while that was not said explicitly in 2013, it certainly was woven through our housing master plan, and it's a very intentional part of what we're doing now as we update our housing master plan and are working on a project we call Housing 2040. So our housing master plan also included a call to faith communities to participate in the creation of affordable housing. And I think that's consistent with our shared desire to repair the world. And faith communities were a very good audience. And that's because they own land. And in the city, at the time we came up with this, it was 126 acres, just waiting to be developed. You are, of course, and someone alluded to this earlier, are familiar with need from your work in the community. Housing is one of the greatest drivers of people's inability to eat healthfully, have good child care, have resources for their health. There's a lot of synergy with your mission, and you're very focused on eternal things and perpetual affordable housing. And you're located in every neighborhood. So you help to make sure that we achieve that goal of geographic distribution. And the other thing that we found is that faith communities are really evolving. And their desire to be part of a social mission in the world is much greater than it probably has ever been so articulated. So I'll talk to you today about Alexandria's experience with faith-based development. So far, we've had 5 churches work on affordable housing in the city. One is beginning that journey. These 5 churches are going to contribute over 550 affordable housing units. And so it is the churches that are helping our housing master plan target and our regional target stay on track. That does not include our housing authority, which acquired a property called Pendleton Park Apartments right next to the Braddock Metro that was developed about 50 years ago by Third Baptist Church. So there have always been congregations involved in this work quietly, and for many of them back 40, 50, 60 years ago, they were using HUD products that were available, because at that time they saw a need that has only grown. I'm very pleased to say that in Alexandria, all 5 churches are still operating. That is not always the case. And we have ongoing interest from many denominations. We have 4 churches that are actively discerning if this is the right way to go, and our first groups that aren't Christian churches. And I'm sure at least 2 of them are going to move forward. So 4 of our churches selected a nonprofit development partner to work with, and 1 created its own nonprofit to develop and operate the project. And I will say their nonprofit received a lot of technical and financial support from the city. The guy that's currently my development director, I think, spent 2 years on the site, but also from Virginia Housing and from other funders to get them through. But since it opened, it's been full, and it's operated very smoothly. So, projects never look as good as they do on the day you first think of them, and then after they're leased up, they look good again. So it's looking good again. And besides technical assistance, and by technical assistance I mean some things that aren't very technical, like introducing churches and congregations to other churches that have done this before, whether they've decided to move forward or not. But we also may introduce them to, our planning and zoning colleagues. Sometimes the biggest barrier for a church to go forward is, what will parking look like? How will they figure out the traffic pattern? So we're very glad to be sort of the entryway to what the city bureaucracy, but what we hope are really lots of resources to help churches and faith communities. And then, of course, we're involved as a permanent funder for many projects. So I have 5 photos, and we'll just go through these quickly. So the first is Beasley Square, and this was done by Shiloh Baptist Church and Harambe, a nonprofit they formed. I will say this is the city's only experience with real NIMBYism. Some of the churches here might disagree. But it was proposed to be 18 senior units. It was in a part of Old Town where affordable housing was looked at with lots of pearl clutching. And by the time it finished, it was down to 8 senior units. And I hope they're making good trouble. But at any rate, that was, I have to say, we have a community and elected leaders who are very, very supportive. The next one is St. James Plaza, which was developed by St. James United Methodist Church and AHC. The next one is the Spire, which is Church of the Resurrection, also AHC as its nonprofit developer. And these 2 projects, St. James and Church of the Spire, Church of the Resurrection, are literally on the same street with Beauregard in between. Both have moved into smaller sanctuaries, but are going strong. And this last photo, no, not next to last photo, is the Waypoint at Fairlington, which is Fairlington Presbyterian and Wesley Housing. And that's our newest. It opened about 1.5 years ago. So, and then the last photo is a project called Old Town West. It is owned by Alfred Street Baptist Church. They actually bought this affordable housing when they were going to make their own church bigger. I used a little bit of my residual Catholic, make someone feel very guilty by saying, surely you're not going to just tear this down when the affordability expires. So they have 75 townhomes and plan to build back 3 or 4 times that amount under a new zoning tool the city has developed to preserve housing. So I like to, when I work with faith communities, I sort of like to talk about what I call the D's of when you're going to be successful. And We really like to be the first call. I was on a conference call recently where, this is a big trend and some of the governments are sort of overwhelmed. And I said, we like it when people call us and have great ideas. But it is good if you've done some pre-work. So discernment, which I know you will be talking about, and what are we sort of called to do? Knowing the development potential of your land, what can we do? Knowing about how your faith community makes decisions, who decides about the use of land and types of projects, deputizing a steering committee, and these may be people, they don't all have to have a background in construction, but they're the leaders of the congregation, whether formal or informal, and communicators about the project, both to your congregation and to the locality. It's very important to delegate lots of day-to-day stuff, and most of the decisions, I've seen faith communities get tripped up when they have to move along congregationally, and big decisions or small decisions, everybody has got to be involved. That can be hard. Who will the development partners be? And someone has already said, it's a long-term relationship, and it is. So picking groups, nonprofit partners who share your values and act with integrity, I think is especially important for a faith community. And then, of course, the development agreement, because at the end of the day, you've got to commit things to paper. And I think here I've stressed having attorneys, because I think sometimes a church sometimes will trust too much, and interests aren't always aligned all the way through. So I think it's a healthy thing to have an attorney advising the faith community. So, and then just quickly, what are the challenges I've seen in working with faith communities? I think the biggest one is making sure that everybody feels they've been brought along, keeping your congregation informed, engaged, and supportive. There are so many challenges along the way, and there's a lot of time. So I think making sure that you keep everybody informed and feeling like they're really important to the project's success. Understanding the time and cost of the development approval process, as well as project funding. Affordable housing is a real alphabet soup of funding sources and competition and some things that don't feel like what you probably wanted to be involved in, but it's all sort of part of this process. I think also, managing risk, relocation of your services if you plan to move forward, and then managing everyone's expectations, because change is a very hard thing. Even sometimes when people are supportive of change, the process itself can be hard. And then I think, NIMBYism, and we're all about loving our neighbors, but it's sometimes hard when they're coming to public meetings and saying terrible things about your project. So I think this is, it's a challenge for faith communities. And to this, I know a lot of congregations and advocates are involved in this faith and housing legislative proposal, and I will say, I've sort of said to some who are talking about it that, it's still important, I think, to get that development approval so that everyone feels that, the process has been fair and the issues of the community have been looked at. I'm not against the legislation, but I think that having some kind of a process, a more streamlined process, but that allows a church or a faith community to continue, knowing that the jurisdiction supports it, is very important. And then what I call the afterlife, because after the project is over, you've got to have a plan for that too. And you've landed in your new building, or you're back, and you've sort of survived this. So I look forward to being with you today and appreciate your attention. And if you just go, so I just want to point out that picture in the middle below is when we took sledgehammers AHC did not want to do a regular groundbreaking. So we took sledgehammers to the district office, not to the church. So. But people really liked it.
We are very grateful for the financial support of Virginia Housing, and Kanisha Brown is our Regional Director for Northern Virginia, so happy to introduce her.
Oh, next slide. Thought I updated that. Hi, everyone. So I have quite the deck to get through, and I'm going to try to breeze through it, but hit the kind of high level. So today I'm going to just talk about briefly Virginia Housing for those who are unfamiliar with us, our organization, a quick rundown of the services we provide and resources, and then how we continue to partner with faith-based organizations. Next slide. So our mission at Virginia Housing is to help Virginians attain quality, affordable housing. We receive no tax dollars. We work in partnership with public and private sector to build programs and communities that basically transform the way Virginians live their lives and their access to housing. Next slide. So our organization is structured with 3 primary departments. That's rental housing, homeownership, and community outreach division. And while some of that may be very intuitive of what rental housing and homeownership does, I do want to spend a little more time on our community outreach division and what we kind of do, which is really where you see a lot of the partnerships with faith-based organizations begin. We have a variety of different partnerships. We partner with local governments, nonprofits, supportive housing organizations, public housing authorities, and of course, faith-based organizations. Next slide. We are actually starting a new strategic plan, but just to brief you on some of our original strategic plan goals, of course, addressing the state housing needs, addressing unmet rental needs for low-income housing, strengthening homeownership programs for first home buyers, and then, of course, delivering superior long-term financial and operating performances. Next slide. Okay, so while Virginia Housing is based in Richmond, Virginia, the organization decided to expand its presence to Northern Virginia some years ago because this market is very unique, and so they wanted to be able to make sure that they were able to seize the uniqueness of this area and understand its challenges as it relates to revitalization projects. Next slide. Okay, so quickly, I'm going to get into community outreach and what we do because, again, it's not as straightforward as rental housing. Next. Okay, so our community outreach efforts are centered around guiding partners to the appropriate Virginia housing resource, which can be tricky. My team does do what we call brain trust sessions, and that's where we sit down, we hear your ideas, and then we kind of gather and give some input on what resource may be best to try to get you to the finish line or even get the wheels started. We support, of course, our housing planning and project development activities, participate in stakeholder meetings. We also promote Virginia Housing, of course, at conferences and events, and then we connect our partners to other agency resources, which I think is very important because sometimes we're not always able to help. But what we can do is provide the contact or information of resources that may be able to help. Next slide. Okay, so we do a couple of events that I think will be really crucial to your understanding and more in-depth of Virginia Housing. One is our community impact session, and this is what we call the road show. And it's a series of events that we have that's centered around what we are, what we do, what kind of resources we have, and it really digs more in depth. And this happens once a year at multiple locations. Then we have our Community Resource Connection series, which those are 2 kind of tongue twisters, but they're very different. So the Resource Connection series focus on topical areas. So we had one recently on public housing authorities and private-public partnerships. So it's really based on what kind of topic we hear that our partners want to hear more information on, and we pull from other agencies as well as our own kind of expertise. Next slide. So now just to get into those specific resources that will be applicable to some of the faith-based projects and what you guys do, but first I'm going to talk on how we do what we do. So before I said, we don't use tax dollars. So we use a acronym, will REACH funds, and REACH stands for Resources Enabling Affordable Community Housing in Virginia. And this is basically our own generated fund, utilizing our own internal generated revenue that we put into this REACH fund. And it does a lot of great things that branch across those three departments. So workforce housing and low-income rental, we do grants, we do counseling, we have funds for making homes more accessible, helping nonprofit partners increase their capacity, and so much more. Next slide. So just to get into the specific products that those REACH funds actually fund. So we have a community building grant, a capacity building grant, and this helps like organizations to build their capacity. We also have housing counseling and educational grants. We have community impact grants, which I think this is where we've seen a lot of our partnerships start with faith-based organizations. So we have specific funds, and I'll get a little bit more into this into the next slide, but specific funds for that due diligence. So that starting off, getting an AE to come in if you have an existing building and you want to have an assessment done on it, you're trying to figure out what you can do, what's feasible. We see a lot of faith-based organizations come in to utilize these funds. Next slide. So then, of course, we have our pre-development funds, which is also a very utilized resource. And this is for, again, those kind of due diligence activities, the beginning of a development project where you're still kind of figuring everything out. And these cover kind of your engineering services, marketed studies, environmental reports, surveying, permit fees, appraisals, and it is a 0% interest for the first 36 months. Next slide. Okay, so this is the one I really wanted to spend some time on. So there are three things that we really try to emphasize when it comes to Virginia housing and how we partner with faith-based organizations. One is to educate. The second is to support, cha-ching, and the third is to connect. So educate is going back to those initial kind of resources where if there is a topic in particular that maybe a group of partners want to know about, like if you're kind of understanding how do I get a project started, how do I get through the planning phase, those are things that we could do a topical-based kind of connection, resource connection series on. And then to support, of course, going back to those kind of finances and grants. So we have these project planning grants, and that kind of helps with your AE assessment. So kind of the beginning of your project, if you have something existing, if you don't, kind of getting a site plan together, impact study, feasibility studies, and then lastly, to connect. So as I said before, we don't always have the resources for everyone's project. But even more so, what we do have is social capital. So we are everyone's best friend. So that allows us to be able to say, hey, well, if you want to do some type of supportive housing, if you want to do, if we don't have the resources for you, here is a partner that we could connect you with that does have the resource, or here is an organization that specializes in this specific type of project. So I think the social capital, on top of the planning grants, is really where our bread and butter is when it comes to our faith-based partnerships. Next slide. So another thing that we try to do is not to just kind of talk about what we have for development resources, but also to connect with your congregations. So one of the things that we've done in the past, if we had a dual kind of session, the first half will be someone from community outreach talking about the grants and, of course, the development side. But then the next will be someone from home ownership talking about home ownership and really connecting with their congregations that may want to be first home buyers, or we even have, some resources for second home buyers. So this kind of gives a rundown of the impact I think that my team has made with being a conduit of information down to the Richmond team. At first, we really wanted them to understand how housing prices have risen in this market, and to really make sure that they can address that in some way. So they did change the threshold for the housing market, well, for our loans up here. Next slide. Okay, just quickly to touch on our rental division. So it's pretty obvious what rental does. Of course, we administer low-income tax credits, and we finance development projects. But I wanted to specifically talk about one of our little niche departments. It's a sub-department in rental that I have seen a lot of partnership with faith-based organizations. Next slide. and that is our champions of our strategic market team. And so they really help with financing, especially the construction phases, for projects that are targeted towards helping with supportive housing, transitional housing, even if you have just some type of mission-based that's outside of like your normal kind of renters, but more philanthropy work. We've seen them really look at it case by case and are able to pull some funds to really make a project move forward. Next slide. So just to break down, if you don't remember anything of my presentation today, I really want to emphasize how we interact and when we come in to play a role in a project. So we all know that projects can take on a multitude of phases. It's not just these simple 5, but I think just to keep it simple, these simple 5s kind of do the trick. So we come in, of course, pre-development, so that initial part of the project, okay, you're figuring things out, you're figuring out your requirements, your program, your feasibility of a project. We can come in with grant financing to help with that. Then also design. Depending on the project, you may, if it's a low income tax credit, rental may be involved a bit with that. They do have their own design standards because we do want to make sure that all the projects that we are part of are quality, affordable housing. But then we also have community impact grants for community outreach, residential outreach, those type of activities. Procurement, we don't really have anything for that. But we come back in, if you do have our financing, during the construction phase, we have a team that will come out and do some inspections, making sure everything is going smoothly. And then at the end, of course, if there is a home ownership opportunity, our home ownership division could come in for mortgage and support. We also have first home buyer training and counseling programs. And then also our community outreach does ribbon cuttings and sponsorship events. Next slide. So this is my lovely team's contact. We will be at the expo. We have a table. So if you guys are interested in connecting, we would love to sit down and discuss this a little bit more. I know I fast talked this whole presentation, but I had limited time. So please bear with me with that. But thank you so much. And I hope to see you guys at the table.
Okay, can you hear me? I'm going to go ahead and welcome our first panel today. This is a panel that we're going to be talking about discernment. So let me just give everybody a minute to come up and join us again. Sure. I know.
My new hip.
Wonderful. Welcome. We get the fun part, we get the hard part, I think, to talk about discernment for our congregations and deciding how to do this. And we know that faith communities really have always played a role in meeting unmet needs in our societies. We have such an incredible tradition here in our country, really, where faith communities have stepped in to provide hospitals, faith communities have stepped up to provide schools and education, and now really the issue of our time is affordable housing. So really grateful to have all of you here with us to talk about how your faith community discerned the opportunity to kind of lean in many, many difficult ways to solve the affordable housing challenges. So I'm thrilled to welcome our panelists today. So we have the Reverend Joe Belzer, who's the rector of the Church of the Resurrection in Alexandria. We have Dr. Philip Faig, who's senior pastor at Old Town Community Church in Alexandria. And we have Jean Cross, the CMUC leader, lay leader here. Jean, congratulations again on this wonderful, beautiful, amazing property that I know you've worked so hard. So I'm going to go ahead and give you all about 5 minutes to tell a little bit of your story, and then we have some questions for you at the end, but I'll turn it over to you, Reverend Joe.
Okay. So I was hanging out, volunteering at an Episcopal church in the West End of Alexandria in 2012, right after I was ordained to the diaconate, and then later that year to the priesthood. I was job hunting. I was just there while I was job hunting. And the church was between rectors, between pastors, and they were deciding whether they were going to continue to hunt for a priest or whether they were going to do something else, okay? And what happened was the leadership of the church decided to halt their search for a new rector, a new priest, and spend a year discerning what their future should be. And they asked me if I would be their priest, which was interesting because I had told our bishop and them when I started hanging out there, I could not and would not, be their priest. So they went behind my back to the bishop and asked him for permission to get around that little clause. And then they came to me and suggested I be their priest, which I think was accidentally quite a good idea because being so new, I had to do my own discernment on whether that was something I could do. And with the church name Resurrection, I thought, maybe there's something here. And then people started coming up to me one at a time privately saying things like, I don't know what happened, but I began fill in the blank, began praying more, and suddenly I think I should spend more time at church. Or I don't know what happened. I was against this affordable housing project in my next to my house, but somehow I think we're being called to do something like that. I'm like, what? So anyway, it was kind of easy for me to think there was life in this church. That would be good to be involved with them as they discerned whether or not they should continue as a church or just declare success and say, we've done everything God has wanted us to do. I see some nodding out here from some of you who've been through this, right? And one of the other things that we accidentally kind of did well from the very start was we said, okay, you're new here. It's probably not a good idea for you to come in and say, I think you should tear down your church and do something else. Because there might be a lot of people who disagree with that idea. Okay? So we chose some leaders who were really, really talented. We have fortunate to have a whole bunch of those, and you all do too. And said, okay, you be the ones that go lead a discernment effort, and we'll give you all of 2013 to do that, okay? And you spend the whole year doing it. Don't just try to do it overnight. And listen to all ideas from all the people in our congregation and explore all of those ideas. And don't just come in and say, we want to build affordable housing, because surely that will save us. Although we went around that whole year saying, please, won't you save us? Won't you save us? Won't you save us? And basically, what happened at the end of that year was most of the people were convinced that we should at least explore it. So that's our discernment story, at least for the first year. Okay? I will also flip to the end of our process and say one of the things that many, many, many people, if not most people in our church, told me then and tell me now they learned through the whole 8-year process of completing our project was that God provides every single thing needed to do what God is calling you to do. And if you just skip the discernment step, you're going to get it wrong. So that's my discernment story. Your turn.
Thank you so much. Sorry. Do you want to go ahead? Yeah, okay. Thank you, Dr. Fake. Yeah. You might have to.
Okay, great.
Perfect.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, hi, my name is Phil. Thank you for not calling me Dr. Phil, although that happens a lot in my congregation. I want to tell you about a program we've developed that's in the space that can help guide your congregation through the journey of discernment without necessarily a bias of where it ends up. But I'm the senior pastor of Old Town Community Church in the heart of Old Town. And about 9 years ago, we went on a journey. We have about 50,000 square feet. Half of it we weren't using, and actually really more than half of it, right? I kept telling our leaders we have the highest price storage facility in Northern Virginia because, as you know, churches acquire a lot of stuff. And so we went on this journey of discernment. We actually considered affordable housing for a variety of reasons that didn't work out for us. But one of the things our congregation recognized is that we we own our bricks and mortar, and we want to use our bricks and mortar to grow goodness in Alexandria. And so we adopted this idea that we're going to at least give over half of our square footage for goodness to grow. So we created this community hub, and in this community hub we have 9 now recovery groups that meet there. We have a hot breakfast program that feeds the hungry, some of whom are unsheltered. We have a little hub pop-up grocery store for Alive, which is a fantastic organization in Alexandria. And we have a nonprofit center. And we started a nonprofit center called The Common Good because our idea there was let's do whatever we can to help the most good happen. And if we can offer gathering space, office space, training space, all that, at way below market rates, then all those organizations could invest more of their overhead into their mission. And so we went on that journey of discernment, and it has been just an amazing ride for us. One of the things we noticed along the way is that while we were really engaging and turning out toward our community, which I know this is not the typical story, but COVID actually was a growth season for us because all of our feeding ministries and we had to put them out on the streets, just like the restaurants. And people started seeing more of what we were doing. And so that was a really interesting thing for us. But and we opened a little sooner for the recovery groups, and then they told other recovery group leaders, and so that just multiplied for us. So anyway, as we started thinking, what happened when we turned toward the community in a pretty intentional way is our congregation started experiencing renewal. And so it just, I know that's not the story for a lot of congregations, but that was our story. And so as we started looking back a little bit, we thought, okay, there might be some energy here that we want to capture. So we wrote a grant to Lilly Endowment, and we received a grant for $1.25 million to create this program called Building for Hope. And it's a discernment journey that can help congregations go through a focused way of deciding what they can do to reach their community. And I know many of the congregations that go through Building for Hope will indeed choose affordable housing, which is just wonderful and is what we hope for. I'm way off my slide, so just it happens every Sunday, so don't, but what we're trying to do I know I'm on a time limit here, so what we're trying to do with Building for Hope is create a movement of churches that will take their underutilized facilities, turn them into a place of goodness in their community for the purpose of revitalizing their mission. And through this, it's a 2-year cohort-based journey. And we have some wonderful partners. One, I think you're going to get a book from Rooted Good. Did I see that right? So one of them is Rooted Good, which has been a fantastic partner for us. Another is Center for Healthy Churches that provides coaches for clergy. But in Building for Hope, what we hope to do is help a congregation find that convergence between their assets, in other words, what they have, their passion, and a powerful need in the community for the purpose of creating a social enterprise that will meet a community need, ignite the church's passion, and provide financial resources to sustain that new social enterprise and the facility that houses it. So in a nutshell, that's Building for Hope. Last thing I'll say is that the grant from Lilly provides all the funding for the cohort journey. So we have our first cohort is full. We just got the grant in July. It has taken off. We have churches from East Coast to West Coast, multiple denominations engaging this time of discernment. And so Lilly provides all the funding for it, the coaches, the hotels, the food, everything except travel to Alexandria. We'll even provide parking in Alexandria, Old Town. which is not a small part of that grant. So anyway, thank you. I'll stop there. If I can stay for a bit of the expo. If you'd like to talk about Building for Hope, you can catch me right after we dismiss. That'd be wonderful.
Thank you. That's amazing. So Jean, thank you. That's really so interesting. And again, discernment's the hardest part. So any sort of support in peer learning is incredible. So Jean, if you could just tell us a little bit about your discernment journey here.
Thanks. My wife tells me at my age that I can't talk without notes and keep it brief, so it's one of those things. I will tell you that this will be, for whatever you choose to do, is going to be an evolutionary process. You won't necessarily get it right the first time, but by the time you get to the end, it'll be what you need to do. The journey itself, I'll tell you 3 points that if you remember nothing else about what I've got to say, remember these 3 things. Identify where you are, so you know what you're starting from. Identify where you want to go through the discernment process. And I can tell you that everybody's route will be different. No 2 people are going to do it the same way. You're going to get there by whatever means is appropriate for you. For Central, this process started probably in 2005. The building process is a little later than that, as Alex will have on one of the slides in a minute. And we recognized that the church needed to do something different. We needed to get outside the church. We needed to be part of the community. The church is just a building, but it's really what you're doing in the community. And so we tried initially to do some noticeable events around the building, trying to get more attention to the church, and people were thinking the building was closed. Oh, you mean that church is live? Yeah, we're still here. So we were looking at still getting outside the building. In 2007, we had an opportunity to meet with Bishop Story, who was one of the South African bishops that was here for another meeting, and he was associated with friends of our congregation, so we were able to enjoy a dinner and a couple of lunches and talked about how we would use the assets of the church to bring people into the building, to make disciples and make this a realistic, more vibrant congregation. We did a prayer walk around the community. We saw what was actually in the community. The homeless in this area are invisible. And I bet you all of us know somebody, but we don't know they're homeless. You'll see them in the mall, they'll have a bag. And it's a store bag from Macy's or one of the stores, so they look like they belong. They're sitting on a bench, probably spending an hour and a half to drink a $2 Coke or something like that, but they're there. The folks are there. We started an important homeless ministry for us, working with Friday night and partnering with our folks at what's now Path Forward and with the folks at the food pantry, AFAX in Arlington, to make all of this happen to where we could connect people with services. We were actually getting well outside the building. But as we looked at our deteriorating building, we said, you know, this building doesn't serve our needs anymore. The preschool is not really what it ought to be. The church is falling down around us. Even if we fix the church, we're still going to have an old building. We'll have 1923 plumbing, we'll have 1923 wiring. It's not the church we want it to be. So it was time to do something different. And we began to look at what that might be. We put together some requests for proposal with various developers, and the congregation was beginning to recognize by that time how poorly the building was serving us. And so the congregation supported the activity, the proposals. We took those out with the idea of trying to develop the facility to where it would be debt-free for us, serve our mission requirements, and still meet the needs for worship space. And all of that began to come together until we tried to go for funding. There is where the real rub is, and there's where the real excitement for some of the other speakers today are going to talk about what opportunities are available for you. But as you get down through it, you'll find that at the end, you'll get it done, but it's important to have clarity of purpose through the whole process. You want to have your real objective out in front of the congregation. It's important that you communicate that often, very often, and very clearly and simply. You'll hear people that'll say, nah, we've done that before, we don't want to do that, I heard about somebody else that's done that. So it takes a while to get everybody comfortable with where you're going. One of the things that helped as we talked about our new building with our congregation is we had a big post-it session. And everybody put what they wanted up for the new building. And they also listed the things that were important to have. And we tried to honor as much of that as we could in putting the whole project together. But I will tell you, you'll have surprises in that. And I'm not going to ask from this group, but I can tell you the group we met with, that our church that were present for the posted sessions and what was really required in the new building. The first thing was more bathrooms. I would not have, that would have never been on my list, but you know. As you go through the process, you're going to need alternate plans. You're going to need some ideas as to things that, well, you're going to have a plan B and maybe even a C and D in our case, and expect a lot of surprises. The other thing that is really important, and you're going to hear that from people today, and they're here, you're going to need internal and external partnerships. Even within your church organizations, you will have folks that want to tell you what's best for your location, whether it's how many parking spaces you're going to need, or whether it's how big your sanctuary needs to be. All of those people are intending to help, but they are not necessarily the folks on the ground. And unless you have developed the relationships that allows you to convince those folks, you have a faith-based reason and a discerned-based reason for going where you're going, it's important. We had people on strategic church committees across the conference so that when we were ready to ask for things, people already knew where we'd been, and it was really important. And bring on your technical talent early, your consultants, whether they're real estate or attorneys, those people need to be there as soon as possible.
Thank you. Great technical advice. So let me ask you a couple of questions. So for you, and I'll start with you, Reverend Joe, and maybe, do you want to go back to your slides?
Yeah, I'd
if
love to
that's
pull up my
possible?
slides if you could. I didn't see them before. There we go.
Yeah,
What
so
are
we
you
can
asking?
see the beautiful pictures, yes. So what was the hardest part of your discernment process for you and your congregation? There were probably multiple, but reflecting upon that, what was the hardest part for you?
Well, I'll tell you the hardest part, and it wasn't very hard, was we actually lost one couple during our year-long discernment process. And we lost that. They were beloved. Every person in our church was beloved, and we couldn't afford to lose anybody. And they moved away to another state shortly thereafter, so we at least consoled ourselves, that they were going to leave anyway. But really, we didn't have any deep problems during our discernment process because we included everybody. We included absolutely everybody in our congregation. Even when it came to our formal votes, we let everybody vote, even if they weren't official members. And of course, then we had to keep 2 sets of books, for our judicatory. And we had a total of 3 formal votes during our whole process. Not during the initial year. We did a go, no-go consensus decision when we found out that we couldn't get both an income stream from our project and a new building because our property was only about 2 acres. So we couldn't build affordable housing on our property, and a new church. So we wanted a new church. Actually, we'd rather have just had the money, but our bishop said no, we had to build a new church. So there's a couple of issues that came up, but they weren't really showstoppers. They didn't break it. And I think the fact that we took the time that we took to do the formal discernment process for the year, I think the fact that lay leaders were leading it, and I think that we had these votes and we let everybody have opinions. They came up with 20 ideas. We explored them all. And basically what happened was the other ideas fell away during the process. And all the other churches that were involved in these kind of projects told us they had a big split in their congregation, and I think it's because those who had a split, I noticed, didn't do that much discernment ahead of time. A long answer to your question. You probably have others.
Nope, I do. But I do want to ask Phil, like from a global perspective for the members in your cohort, what are they struggling with in the discernment phase? What are the challenges, or what were your own church's challenges trying to get to how you're using your real estate assets?
So we just received the grant in July, and so the cohort starts in February. So this kind of next year is the pilot year for 4 years, 48 churches total. But I have met with each pastor and leadership team from each church virtually, and I would say the focus for the discernment. In other words, getting to that place where, okay, this is our passion and this is our key idea, and rediscovering the community, as my friend said here, of get to know your community. I think that's a real key part. So. For us as a congregation, we kind of went to it. It went well for us. We were fairly united the whole way. Yeah. So,
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you. Jean, how about for you? What was the most difficult part of your discernment?
I think the most difficult part was really deciding how much allocation of space as we built. How much is for the preschool and how much is for the worship area. There are compromises everywhere, which I would not go into. It drives me to distraction. But we tried to keep as much of the old building as possible. The stained glass windows you see all came from the old building, and the congregation definitely wanted those. And the design of that was a challenge. The altar is also from the old building. The baptismal font. So we tried to bring comfort things with us from the previous, and people can still associate with, oh yeah, that's those are my mother's things that are on the altar table. The table in the narthex, the big wooden block table, used to be in the kitchen, and we had to redesign the legs for it because the people that originally used it were short ladies in the kitchen. And so we put new legs on it. But so there's something almost in every room where folks relate to. We brought the old building with us. It's just not a new building that's sterile.
Wonderful. You did an amazing job, I think, with the old and the new. I want to honor the fact that we have 2 more panels and we're a little behind schedule, so we're going to wrap up this panel. Please reach out to these amazing leaders to talk about their discernment process afterward, and I'll turn it over to Nina, so thank you.
You good? Thank you.
Hello again, Nina Janapa with VEREP, Virginia Episcopal Real Estate Partners. I'm really excited to introduce this panel. We've brought here today 2 of the most amazing CEOs in the nonprofit affordable housing world. I know them both well. Camilla McAfee. I'm trying to call you Kamala. Everybody does. And of Wesley Housing, based here in Fairfax, and Carmen Romero, who's the wonderful CEO of True Ground Housing Partners, which is the new name of the Arlington Partnership for Affordable Housing. But also what's exciting about this panel for you is we have 2 rectors here. So we have 2 church leaders that worked with these partners to develop affordable housing. So without further ado, I think this is so rude of me. Julie Wilson-Black, who is the rector of Fairlington Presbyterian Church. And you've already met Pastor Sarah here from Central United Methodist Church. So we have this wonderful opportunity for you, both here in the panel, but afterwards in the expo, to learn from their real experience here. So I think our first speaker is Carmen Romero.
Thank you. Thank you, Nina. It's great to be back together. As you know, Nina was my mentor, prior CEO at True Ground, and worked on all these projects with me. So, Nina, jump in and correct the record if I get something wrong here. A little overview of True Ground. We are based only 3 blocks from here, actually, and we celebrated our 35th anniversary last month. We are housing to over 6,000 individuals. And most of that is in Northern Virginia, but we've now expanded and are doing work in Maryland and cut a ribbon in DC with our first senior affordable development in Ward 4 in just about 60 days. About True Ground, and I would say what distinguishes us from other groups is not only have we gone from just serving the smallest jurisdiction in America, in Arlington County, to becoming a regional player recently, is that I believe we are deeply rooted in not just the bricks and mortar pieces of affordable housing, but the resident services. And I know Camilla and her group at Wesley do feel the same way. So out of our 60 employees, actually over 20 of them are in the services area of True Ground. And that has been life-changing, especially during the pandemic, because keeping people housed in the midst of a pandemic, in the midst of incredible inflationary pressures, job loss, as well as dealing with individuals with mental health crises, others who are food insecure. I spend as much of my time worried about kind of the struggles of our residents once they arrive as we do of building the bricks and mortar. You can go forward. And we are very fortunate to, in addition to the 60 people that work at True Ground, we have a 26-person board of directors, 7 committees that those boards and other volunteers bring to the table. So we have just this wealth of support that comes from the community. And that's really important because, frankly, this is very complex, hard work, and having this close set of advisors in addition to the paid staff that really help make projects like this a reality. We could skip the next page, but our leadership team, and I'll be here afterwards and happy to introduce folks to others. But to focus a little on the building you're in now, Unity Homes, which is what we named it from prior, it was called Boston Station, is a faith-based partnership that we were really coming along this very long 17, 18-year journey when the plans had been done, the zoning and the fight with the community to get the entitlements, the table was set. And after the congregation had decided that they were going to part ways with the prior developer and came out with an RFP, Nina and I submitted. We submitted the first time around, just saying, didn't work out, but we really felt a strong passion. This is a church in our backyard that had done all of this work and invested so much in the zoning. For sure, there must be something that could be done to make this financially feasible. And that is really where we spent the lion's share of our time on this project. And it was quite humbling. I mean, we thought we knew how we could get this done, and we had all sorts of plans and guarantees, and the reality is we too failed. When we went to Virginia Housing for tax credits, we restructured it, we competed in an innovation pool. It was the first time that Virginia Housing had that opportunity. But unfortunately, we did not win. And Nina and I walked away from this project, terminated our contract and said, the prior developer tried twice, we tried once, we have to move on. And then this is where kind of the lesson is about to happen. Every project could fail if you're not taking a precision approach around what is the right moment to actually unlock the potential. And the irony was it was Amazon's arrival into Arlington. In that moment, the state had a bunch of new tools that they were looking to invest in affordable housing. Tools that hadn't existed. So we came back to the congregation and said, will you give us one more try? We think this is that moment. And I'm so grateful they did, and you see before you the fruits of that. I think pretty much everything that we had hoped and dreamed could be possible just emerged. And it's not inexpensive. It's $490,000 per affordable unit. But you were talking about affordability that will last generations. I can tell you the first people that move into a property like this, I'm often here, their first reaction is to close the door to their apartment and they cry because of this is their new home and they know they're gonna stay housed if they walk alongside of us. So with that, I'm gonna pass it back over to you, Nina, or Pastor Sarah, if you'd like to add your reflections.
Thank you. I always have to give credit to I believe it was the APC groundbreaking, or was it the ribbon cutting? It was one of those events that you were there,
it was APC.
and Reverend David Bowers from Enterprise was talking about their project and how when there was no way forward, God made a way, and that really touched Carmen's heart, and that's what I give credit to them coming back and saying, we want to give it one more try, and so I appreciate that. As Jean mentioned earlier, we had to really choose what to focus on in our building. The Post-its had a lot more than just more bathrooms. There were a lot of great creative ministry ideas, but our architect told us that we had a very ambitious program, which means trying to put 20 pounds of potato in a 10-pound sack. So we really had to focus, and that meant our congregation got clear on our mission, which was to support affordable housing, to feed hungry people, and to support early childhood education. So that was why we did choose to commit a significant portion of our physical footprint to Kinhaven School. It started as a Mother's Day Out program of the church, and then eventually grew into its own 501c3. So we have a fair amount of space for children as young as 6 weeks, and during the year, children under 5 are going to be part of the program, and then in the summers, they'll go up to age 12. We are still going through the administration of getting all the licenses needed, so they're not up and running yet, which means that you can actually see the spaces today because there aren't kids in the classroom right now. We've also partnered with APA to make sure that we have 16 spaces set aside for APA residents who have the child care subsidy through Virginia, to make sure that folks who need to have good quality childcare can potentially have it in the building they live in, or the one that's 3 blocks away, or another one that's close by across from the Ballston Metro. We also had the commitment to our feeding program. Jean mentioned that happened on Friday mornings. It served up to 150 people every week, and we wanted to have a space that could continue to serve whatever version of that program would exist. When we started our Friday morning breakfast, the Homeless Services Center wasn't open at that time. It opened over the years, and now they have opportunity to serve a hot breakfast there as well. So the need has evolved over time. But what that means for us now in our new building is that we've partnered with another United Methodist community, the Provision Church, and they run a community cafe on Wednesdays and Thursdays from 9 to 3, welcoming all who want to come to have a good meal and also to connect with the community. So we are seeing that space blossom in a way that we had always dreamed of, and we didn't know quite what it would look like, but we're excited to see what God is doing. And of course, affordable housing. There's 144 units above us. They range from 30% to 60% of AMI, and it is absolutely incredible because for so many years, we were clear on our vision. We had guests who would come to Friday morning breakfast who had slept on the street. Then they got connected to A-SPAN, now Path Forward, but then they needed housing. And so we helped to create housing with the hopes that one day someone would come and live in that apartment. And about 2 months ago, we had a visitor come to worship and tell us, I used to come to your Friday morning breakfast, and now I live upstairs. And I said, you're the man we built this building for. Thank you for coming to worship. And he's come ever since, and he even helped last week. We've been putting together welcome baskets for the residents, and he helped me carry some of them over to the neighbors. So it has been a joy to see these relationships continue to evolve and blossom.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Camilla McAfee, President and CEO at Wesley Housing. Thanks, Nina. Thanks, Lakeisha, for inviting us to this conversation. That's a beautiful story, and that's definitely what it's all about. Wesley, for those of you that do not know, is a 50-year-old nonprofit affordable housing developer that's born out of the United Methodist social justice missions, long-standing policy about serving the community, and I think that certainly is the biggest piece that we have benefited from in partnership with the Fairlington Presbyterian Church, which is a project I'm going to talk to you mainly about today. Go to the next slide. The Waypoint at Fairlington was an opportunity that was presented, not indifferent from some of these other opportunities. I think Jill had mentioned that she had been a consultant to many churches. I think Waypoint was, Fairlington Presbyterian, was one of them. And they had put out an RFP to find a development partner, a partner that we, as we had discussed, is a long-term partner, because beyond the challenges that we have in putting together the entitlements and the financing to get the project built, it is a long-term opportunity once the project is up and operational to be in community with your neighbor. It's one of the few times that you get to select your neighbor, right? And so finding the right partner is really important, as we've been discussing. And we're just so happy that Fairlington saw enough in Wesley and in that partnership to be able to select us to develop 81 units of affordable housing adjacent to their site. This is a prior picture of the parking lot, and I'll let Pastor Julie talk a little bit more about her vision for that parking lot, but it's the parking lot on which we built these homes in the community. We talked a little bit about the cost. It's not a cheap venture. It's not without its time constraints. We went through a significant entitlement process and engagement with the community, and it's always interesting when we develop properties on faith-based land as well as public institutional land, that the neighbors are used to seeing that be in its current condition, and they expect, because of who owns it, for it to be in that condition for perpetuity. But it's always a interesting process to walk them through a vision for a new day. Changes that will enhance not only their personal experience, hopefully, but also be able to open that up for experiences of new neighbors. And so again, that neighborly way, happy that the church chose Wesley to be an owner and landlord next to them on this site. Next slide, please. So again, 81 units of housing at various levels of affordability. This is very typical of the affordable housing that we all provide. We do want to serve not only those whom are at what we call 60% of the area median income, which is really a restriction that's typical of the federal program that we operate under. But we also want to serve people at the lowest income levels, which is 0 to 30% of the area median income. And oftentimes, in order to serve those residents, we're often trying to tap into operating subsidies that we were happy to be able to secure in partnership with the city of Alexandria in this case. We have 9 units that are also subsidized from a rental subsidy program that the city runs. In addition, I talked about those sources. In addition to those federal resources, those state resources, the city also provides significant capital for this as well. Next slide, please. So featuring Waypoint, but did want to touch on our partnership with the Virginia Diocesan organization in St. Paul's on the Hill Episcopalian Church in Frederick County, Virginia. Another project done in partnership with the church. In this case, we walked through the entitlements, we walked through the financing. We had full intentions and design to be able to build back a smaller, more efficient facility for the church, but they opted not to rebuild at that time and redirect resources elsewhere. That's oftentimes the case. But if you can go to the next slide, I believe I do have the finished product of the affordable housing. This is 63 units of affordable senior housing. Again, very similar stack in terms of affordability levels, in terms of amenities, certainly those services that we talked about in providing services for our residents. Depending on who we're serving, we modify the breadth of those in order to meet their needs. and we're happy to be able to provide opportunities for our older adults to be able to get out and engage with one another more often and be in community with one another. I believe that's the end of my slides and presentations. I'm available to be in fellowship with you all after for just a few. I do have to leave a little bit early for daycare pickup. Thank you.
Thank you, Camilla. So I'll tell a little bit of our story from the church's perspective, how the Waypoint at Fairlington came to be. Our discernment process started around 2016, and you can see from the aerial view here that we